Well, thank you, Harold. That's a hard act to follow. I see that I drew the short straw here. I would have much preferred to have introduced Harold than to have followed him. I'm going to make very short remarks because you're here really to hear from Harold. Let me just, I've got really just one question for you, which I'm going to come to in a minute in my role as discussant. Let me first, though, say it's a great honor to have Harold here and to have him as the legal advisor. As he noted, there really is a great fraternity of past legal advisors, and I have two of my predecessors, Edwin Williamson and Bob Owen, here. I was very privileged to endorse Harold as the legal advisor when he was being attacked by conservatives who suggested that he had the audacity to actually believe in international law. Not only do I think really that any president should have his or her own nominees, assuming that they are qualified, but that Harold was particularly well qualified. He was perhaps the most qualified legal advisor nominee in history for some of the reasons that Nancy mentioned. We're really very pleased to have Harold as the legal advisor. He was very supportive of me and my mission when I was the legal advisor, not the least of which was sending me a whole lot of students from Yale Law School. Both he and I and my predecessors had the great privilege to head up what is the largest and finest public international law firm in the world. It is really, for almost everybody in this room is involved in international law in some way, and it is a wonderful job. No matter what the issues are that are thrown at you, it's just a great privilege. You work, as Harold says, with the finest lawyers that there are. I'm actually privileged here at Arnold & Porter to have two alumni of the Legal Advisor's Office, Jeff Smith in the back, who heads our national security law practice, and Paulo De Rosa, who's over here somewhere, who heads our international arbitration practice. There are many others in the room. Terrific lawyers. We work on fascinating issues. What I'm actually seeing more over time now is that historically, every issue that you see in the newspaper had a legal issue behind it. Now, the international law issues are the issues in the newspaper. You just turn from page 1 to page 2, and those are the issues that the legal advisor is working on. You've heard Harold mention just in the 8 months that he has been in office, he's already appeared before the International Court of Justice in the Kosovo case, filed briefs with his name on it before the Supreme Court, negotiated treaties, traveled around the world meeting with our partners. We have terrific diplomats who we work with. Both he and I were privileged to work for outstanding secretaries of state, and we were particularly privileged, both of us, to be really part of the intermanagement team where our advice was valued not just as a matter of legal advice, but really for the policy advice that we would give as well, as long as we separated our policy advice from our legal advice. So wonderful job. For the younger people in the room who may at some point be wanting to go into government, I encourage you to think about the legal advisor's office. Now, for my question, my presence here today reminds me a little bit of a time about 3 or 4 years ago when I was invited by the students at Yale to come and give a presentation at Yale. I had been a legal advisor at that point for about a year, a little bit longer than Harold has now. And I gave a presentation about the things that we had been doing so far and that we wanted to do in the area of international law. And I began with Secretary Rice's personal commitment to international law. I talked about the fact that she had appeared before the American Society of International Law as one of her first public appearances, the first Secretary of State to do so in 30 years. She appeared again the following year at the centennial of the American Society of International Law. I think was the last Secretary of State to appear before the American Society. And I also talked about some of the actions that we were taking to engage in international law. We had already at that point begun to try to begin the process of re-engaging with the International Criminal Court after what I thought was the unfortunate unsigning of the Rome Statute in the first term of the administration. We agreed to the referral of the genocide in Darfur to the International Criminal Court under Resolution 1593, and I personally gave a number of speeches saying that we would support the prosecutor, and we began a process of quite strong support for the court in the second term that was applauded by human rights groups. One of the first things we had also done was to take strong action to implement the decision of the International Court of Justice in the Avena case involving the denial of consular notice to 51 Mexican nationals on death row. And in the early part of 2005, the President had ordered the states to review and reconsider all of those death sentences. Texas, the President's home state, actually challenged him, and it was taken all the way up to the Supreme Court, as you know, and the Supreme Court reversed, and that case still lingers to this day. I mentioned at the time all of the treaties that we were working on, including the Law of the Sea Treaty. The President had recently issued a statement calling for the rapid Senate approval of the Law of the Sea Treaty. And of course, I talked about what we were trying to do to get out of the sort of the detainee morass, including changes that had just been made to the Military Commissions Act, the fact that we had transferred out by that point 300 or 400 detainees from Guantanamo, that the President had said that he wanted to move to the day that Guantanamo should be closed. And so I emphasized all of the things that we were doing. Now, sitting in the front row of the auditorium at Yale was the dean of the Yale Law School. And Harold, who it really is a very good friend of mine, as I said, has been very supportive of me, asked the first question, just as I get to do today. And Harold then made a very trenchant dissection of all of the remarks that I had just made. Not directed at me personally, but really Harold has been a persistent critic of the past administration, and essentially said, yes, John, I know you're trying, but, not good enough. Guantanamo is not closed. You really need to become party to the International Criminal Court. You need to work harder to comply with the rulings of the ICJ. You should not have pulled out of the optional protocol that allows the cases actually to be litigated before the ICJ. I've got concerns about military commissions. I've got concerns about Guantanamo. You shouldn't just be trying on the Law of the Sea Treaty. You should be trying on CEDAW and CTBT and a number of other treaties. So Harold really sort of took me apart at that point. So my question for you, Harold, is you've been working hard now on many of these same issues, just as I did as the legal advisor, and I think you and I share a number of the same concerns. The problem is the legal advisor is not a solo operator inside an administration or even inside the federal government. There are bureaucratic politics at play where the Defense Department and the CIA and the Justice Department and the White House may not agree with the views of the legal advisor. As Harold rightly said, to get a treaty through the Senate, you have to get 67 votes through the Senate. It's also an election year this year, although in any year, unfortunately, there is just not strong support for international law and international institutions inside the United States. Many of our senators tend to believe that treaties are things that we do to be nice to other countries, to be part of the international club, and fail to see that the reason that we enter into treaties is because they're in our interest, not in the interest of other countries. So, Harold, I assume, knowing you as I do, that you must be frustrated with the lack of progress on a number of these issues. The policies of rendition and military commissions, indefinite detention without trial, predator strikes have continued to be criticized by human rights groups. The Defense Department has opposed any strong engagement with the International Criminal Court. And with respect to the ICJ's rulings, in fact, the administration has done nothing so far to even seek legislation while we've got nearly 50 Mexican nationals still on death row.